Welcome to Exploring Axon, a podcast where we discuss Axon Framework, Axon Server, and their ecosystem. I am your host and the producer of this podcast, Sara. In this episode, I spoke with Allard Buijze about his responsibilities as the CTO at AxonIQ. Allard shared how he balances his time between software development and research and his other activities in this role. We also discussed new projects at AxonIQ and what his thoughts are on open source community and where it's heading. And we wrapped up the conversation by Allard's views and advice on other entrepreneurs hoping to work in the field of technology and software development. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and let's have a listen. Hi, Allard. Thank you for joining me. Today, I have some different questions for you. I want to talk about your responsibilities as the CTO of AxonIQ. We did have a question a while ago about the background of AxonIQ and why you started the company and so on. But now I want to ask a bit more specific questions about your role here at our company. So with that said, in non-technical words, I know that's not an easy one for you because you like being included in the technical world of things. What would you say is the problem that AxonIQ is trying to solve?
Yeah, and you asked the CTO. You do know that the T is for technology.
Yes, that's why I said it's hard for you not to.
Yes. But so the problem that we are solving is related to the complexity of software. And if you realize that in the past, several decades, but especially in the last 2 decades, the role of software has immensely changed within businesses, right? It has changed from being a thing on the side, and yes, you can use a bit of software to help the human process to make it slightly more efficient, to where now the software is taking over of how the business is run. So the demands on that software are growing a lot. The demands of our users are growing a lot. They become much more demanding of what they expect of businesses, etc. And in the meantime, because we are doing more software in these businesses, the problem that we're solving is also more complex.
Right.
So we've got a complex environment where we're building the software. We've got complex demands that add to that complexity of software. And what we are doing until a few decades ago, the architectural styles that we're using, we haven't changed that much on them. So we're using simple solutions to solve really complex problems. And that doesn't quite work. So the thing that we're doing is essentially changing the mindset of how software needs to be built. And what we do is an event-driven approach, which is, my apologies, a technical term. However, we align the solution to how the business is actually run. And that way, the software becomes easier to understand, easier to maintain, and also very scalable and powerful.
Fantastic. So a lot of complexity, but we're trying to at least take some of that complexity away and offer solutions to make architects and developers' lives easier. Fantastic. Now, as a CTO at AxonIQ, what would you say is or are your main roles? And how do you then balance this desire, because I know you have a very great desire to develop, with the kind of research that you need to help resolve these complexities and these issues that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, it's indeed very difficult to answer this question because what is this thing I do as a CTO, and what is it that I do as a passionate idiot for event-driven software? And what is it that I do as a founder? Because there are some responsibilities you simply have because you're a founder of a company as well. But the way I see it, I focus on the things that are about the technology that we provide. So our product is also technology. So that falls under my responsibility. And basically all the rest that has to do with administration, I leave that as much as I can to others. So we have that's why we have a CEO to take care of the things that I don't like to focus on.
Yep.
So I like to focus on technology, and that is what are we building, why are we building it, and how should we build it, right? Those are the questions that I try to answer, and it actually takes a lot of communication, much more communication with other humans than actually computers.
Systems.
And
Yep.
that's not even because we have other people that are building the solution, but it's just because to know what you need to build, you need to talk to a lot of people and
Right.
ask them a lot of questions. And it's very easy to make assumptions on, hey, this product is going to make everybody's life easier. Well, it might, and it might be completely unsuccessful because you need to build it in a way that the other people feel it makes their life easier, which is a very difficult one. So finding that balance is basically what I'm trying to do all the time, which is what I really love to do. Um, and the other part of your question was how do I balance software development and research? I don't.
Well,
It's
I think a lot of it is
not
overlapping,
entirely true.
right? Because you have to
Yeah.
communicate to find out this information, which is part of the research. And then you have to then bring in that communication into our products, which is bringing me to the next question, which is what is the latest product that we are working on right now? And what is that specific product trying to solve?
Yeah, there's a couple of products that we're working on, but a one that I would really like to highlight, which is in the a little bit related to the introduction I gave about what is the problem we're trying to solve,
Mhm.
is called Axon Synapse. And
Yep.
right now we are so we've built a framework and a messaging platform to help developers and architects build these complex systems. The disadvantage, especially of a framework, is you cannot really fit it into an existing process or an existing system. Right? It has to be somewhat of at least a new component that you're building that you can then build with this new paradigm. And we've been thinking about how do we get more existing ecosystems and also different programming languages, because our framework is bound to Java, the Java
Mhm.
programming language. But there's also in Amazon, you have these lambdas and you have Google Cloud Functions, and there's all these new processes that are coming. But we also have existing systems. And how can we easily connect these existing systems or different programming paradigms with each other and get similar benefits as you would have with a framework? Now, it's not possible to get all the advantages exactly in the same way, but the more we can provide, the better these advantages are that we can provide to them. Well, the better it is, I guess. So
Yep.
that's what Synapse is going to address. Right now, it's really in the beta phase, but we're already getting some exciting feedback, and as we explore new possibilities, you find out there's more possibilities, and you can start
Of
exploring
course.
those. Which brings
Yeah.
me back to the previous question of how do you
How
balance
do you balance it? Yeah,
research
exactly.
and development? It's the thing that we do is both at the same time. And every time we do something, and this is maybe a bit of advice to whoever listens, is when you're building something, um, it's better to release often and get small groups of people to start working with it, because they're the ones that are going to give you the feedback and they're looking
Mhm.
at things differently. They have a different problem to solve. And if your solution does not help them solve their problem the way they want it to be solved, they're not going to use it. And
Right.
I actually speak to founders quite a lot. So in these different ecosystems that I'm in, and sometimes they're working on something secret, right? And they can't
Hmm.
tell anyone. And like, if it's a secret, you have no business,
Yeah.
because you can't sell
Because you can get
anything
the
unless you
feedback.
know. Yeah, how do you get the
Yeah.
feedback? But you need
Yeah.
to tell a customer what they're buying, otherwise they're not going to buy it, right? And of
Right.
course, there's some details that you don't want to that you consider trade secrets. But if the actual business case that you're working on is a secret, then I wonder if you should really start in the first place.
Right. You have to find a non-secretive part of it to, I guess, start talking about.
and get
Yeah,
feedback,
something.
right? Am I
Exactly.
doing something that makes sense? And would you, and maybe I'm not the target audience, that's fine, but
Yeah.
you should identify your target audience and at least start discussions with them. And it's in no way a guarantee, because we did that at the very beginning of AxonIQ.
Hmm.
And it's not at all a guarantee. The first few customers said they wanted specific features, and well, they said they wanted it, but it's not what they needed. So
I
always
see.
be
Yeah.
very careful in how you interpret those answers as well.
Yeah, kind of goes back to the question of the value. What is the value to your business
Exactly.
and to your customers? Exactly. So you did talk about our first product, which was the framework, right? Axon framework that was built in Java, and a really fantastic product. And also after that, we started working on the messaging platform and also the event store, which is then the Axon server. Now, both of them, Axon Server has an open source version, and Axon Framework is just an open source product. With that said, since you are very involved in and you wanted to create open sourced products, where do you see the future of open source? Where do you think it's heading?
That's a. I don't have a glass ball, so everything I say is just my maybe a little bit of hope combined with reality and expectation. But what I'm seeing is that in the very early days, open source was just something that passionate idiots, myself included, would just build and put on the world, and they would meet other passionate idiots of
Mm.
idiot in a positive sense here, right?
Sure. Yeah.
To share ideas and to improve things. And the beauty of it is that it makes software really accessible. So
Mhm.
you can use the software relatively freely, depending on what the exact license is. But you can see the source code, you can see how it's built. So it's also a very educational process. And I've learned
Mhm.
a lot from building open source software. I think in the time that I've built open source software, I've learned more than building the closed source software. Because again, it forces you to talk to people, maybe through code, and to
Yeah.
people you don't know, and you get feedback and you learn.
And it also
However,
forces you to write something readable, right? And understandable,
oh
because
yeah,
people
code
have to understand
quality
it,
gets
right?
a completely different
Exactly.
metric, right? Because if you
Yes.
build something really ugly, everybody's going to see it. So people
Yeah.
start paying attention to quality, which
Hmm.
is most of the open source software is of really good quality because of that, because it's open
Yeah.
and everybody can see you wrote something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is that it is not sustainable,
Hmm.
because a typically really passionate people have extra time on their hands to do something, and
Yeah.
then things happen in life that change how you can spend your time.
Right.
Um, and it can put a lot of stress on people, and also a lot of these open source projects start as experiments, right? And
Yeah.
how long are you willing to experiment with that?
Yeah.
So Axon Framework started as an experiment for me, and fortunately, I was passionate enough, and things started moving fast enough, so that I noticed, hey, there's something valuable, and there's this. It literally got me around the world to speak at conferences, which is
Hmm.
which is what I really enjoy doing. So it allowed me to create this brand. But the movement I see is that open source becomes much more corporate these days. So
Hmm.
organizations are now also using open source as a way to reach a market. And
Hmm.
basically, it happens in two ways: the good way and the bad way, I guess.
Yeah.
But the good way is, hey, this is something we as an organization are passionate about, and we want to share that with the world. And it's really the almost the Samaritan way of open source software, right? We
Hmm.
give that basically the way we treat Axon Framework. We want people to be able to use the framework. Obviously, we want to make a dollar or two on it as well, but we're not making
Sure.
that on the framework. We're making that on an enterprise version and support and things like that. So
Hmm.
we're not changing in the way the software is accessible. But we also see open source as a way of organizations to dump the burden of needing to maintain something on the community and just saying, hey, it's now open source and good luck with it. We're not going to do anything.
Hmm.
That is not a very productive way, and I feel that is sometimes open source is abused as a dumping ground for projects, corporate projects that have gone too old. Um, And I really hope that the let's say more sustainable approach of finding a way to balance people that are passionate about sharing their software, but as soon as it's being used in a commercial way to drive value for businesses, that these businesses also realize that they have a responsibility to give back
Yes,
in one
that's
way
right.
or another, and that giving
Hmm.
back is very important. And it doesn't need to be payment. It could be all sorts of different ways. Hire, if it was a one man show or one woman show to build this software, just hire that person for to consult or to fix problems. I too often see these requests of, hey, we are a big corporate XYZ and we are using your software, and it is really important that we get this particular issue fixed really right now. And it's your responsibility to make it happen because you built it.
Yeah.
No, it's not,
Like,
right? And we really need to
no.
get back to a more sustainable approach. And
Mhm.
organizations and individuals within large organizations need to recognize their responsibility there. So depending on whether we can do that, I see a really bright future for open source software, where it becomes really about people showing initiative of improving the community as a whole. And I think
Mhm.
we can then really improve a lot in our industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you did mention a couple of things that I'd like to touch on a bit more. One was the fact that you have been able to basically take this passion of yours and go around the world and speak at conferences and share it with everybody else. So, with that said, has that helped you in this current role of the CTO and the founder of basically a software company, and also you mentioned that you have, of course, learned a lot from your experience, and you did share an advice, which was, get the feedback that is needed, and don't base everything on one feedback. Just kind of examine trial and error and sort of move forward. What would you say then for somebody who is planning on possibly trying out this whole thing of entrepreneurship in the field of software and IT, which is extremely competitive? What would you say to them, and what is your advice? Because it's not an easy thing to do.
In relating to public speaking, I
That, and
assume,
also,
or in
yeah, what kind
general.
of
Yeah.
advice you have in general? Yeah.
Yeah, so in general, first, I guess then is you need a lot of different traits in the management of any startup, and I don't think that anyone individually will have them all.
Hmm.
If you look at good entrepreneurs, a really good entrepreneur is able to find people that complement him or her and
Hmm.
get them around you, because there's no way you're going to do it on your own. I see a lot of organizations being founded by two techies, for example, and they're both introvert techies. That's not a good mix, right? We need a
Yeah.
mix of everything, and
Right.
being extrovert. And trust me, I'm not. But being
You're
extrovert
not?
helps. I'm
Shocking.
not.
Okay.
I've learned certain things. So
Yeah, of
if
course.
you I still remember very well and very exact what my first speaking engagement was like at a large conference, and I was extremely nervous, and it was a complete
Hmm.
disaster from my point of view. So
Right.
after it, I was really happy it was over. And
Hmm.
then there was the hallway, and you start walking around the hallway, and people start approaching you and say, "Hey, I saw your talk, and it was great, and I had this question." And the funny thing is that the feedback you get in the hallway is always biased, because people that
Hmm.
didn't like your talk, they will not approach you. They'll just
Yeah.
walk on and do something else. So you get a
Hmm.
lot of positive feedback, and then you do realize that, okay, maybe out of a few hundred people, I've spoken to a few in the hallway, but still you're making an impact on people's lives or
Right.
their job. And that for me was a motivation. So hey, maybe I should try it again. So I
Hmm.
started to try it again. And then I noticed I was doing more and more meetups because of the framework that I was building. I was invited to come talk at meetups, and slowly our audiences become bigger and bigger. and then somebody on the other side of the planet asks you to come over at a conference to have a talk there. Right? And that's where I realized, hey, I need to get this public speaking. I need to get more comfortable on stage.
Yeah.
Because I was, people didn't see my nerves, but I felt them, and I had this feeling that they were in my way of improving. Mm-hmm. So I went to a public speaking training, and this was the kind of training that people would also follow, that TV presenters, for example, would also follow. And one person in my training class, he was a construction engineer, and he was basically the head of a very big tunnel project in the Netherlands. And he said, the king and queen are coming over to, cut the ribbon, and he had to do a speech. So he was like, okay, I better feel at ease, right? And some people speak at large events and some at smaller events. But the ideas are the same. It's about feeling comfortable on stage. And there's a few very simple tips and tricks. And you just need to practice them with a very good teacher. So in my case, it was only a few days spread across a month's time. And it was really helpful just to tricks to become more at ease on a stage.
And I think it's not only helpful when you're doing stage speaking, basically, or presentation at larger conferences or meetups, but I would imagine it would also help you when you are talking to investors, for example, or when you're talking to customers as well, because you have to carry that level of confidence with you to be able to really engage and get your point across.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that when you do this public speaking training, it's not about how you build the story, right? It's more how you present yourself and how you talk. And the thing is that it's basically acting school. Right. So it's just a very short version of an acting school, and you start acting. And yes, that is actually useful in any conversation. You learn how you can emphasize certain concepts. Right. Or make sure that you can say something and have people forget it immediately. And it's there's a few tricks, and I don't always apply them in hindsight. I'm always looking at my own presentations, not literally, because I really can't stand it. But I think, I should have done this, or I didn't do that properly, and so it's always an improvement. But no, it's and it makes it more fun. You get more when you're at ease on stage. It makes it more fun. So at some time, I started to do an experiment at a conference where I knew that people were pretty open-minded, and I thought, I'm going to do this more as a play on stage rather than a boring. Here's my introduction, here's my agenda, and let's go to one topic at a time kind of talk. I started to do this story and have some fun. And at the end of the conference, I was voted as one of the top 3 talks of the conference. So people appreciate that, right? They like to be entertained when they go to a conference. And of course, if you combine that with the getting a good presentation and making sure that your story sticks, people will remember a fun talk much easier than a boring talk. And regardless, when you're talking at a conference or talking to an investor, one thing is you want them to remember your story and make sure you are top of mind. Right? Yeah, you want them to remember you. Otherwise,
you want to make an impression.
You're just one of the many. And I've learned one thing from investors is they have to talk to a lot of people. Right. For every investment they make, they've seen 1,000 companies come by. Yeah. That's you want them to remember you. Yeah.
Exactly. And what would you say your final advice for founders and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so there's one thing that we decided on when we started the company is, and it's a bit of a, it's a word that is used quite a lot these days, but we have a slightly different meaning to it than it usually has, which is diversity. And with diversity, we do not mean men versus women or old versus young or whatsoever. It really means everything. Mm-hmm. And it means getting people in your company that do not share the exact same values or experiences as you do. Because if you only have 20 of you in a company, you might as well do it on your own, right?
Yeah.
You can get more of your work done, but what about all the other stuff? So sometimes it's good to have somebody with just a different point of view. I always joke that to see things in 3 dimensions, you need at least 2 points of view.
Right.
That's why our eyes are a few centimeters apart, because it allows us to then see 3D. And it's the same in business. And when you build a company with your best friend, that might not be the best business partner because of that reason, because you're probably
Very
already way
like-minded.
too
Yeah.
aligned, right? You
Right.
have to be able to disagree and come up with a compromise. And I've got quite a few people I often disagree with around me.
Yeah.
And it helps because it makes you realize that your point of view is not the only one. And in the end, your customer or your future customer will not share your point of view either. So I would say if there's one piece of advice I would give is gather people around you that that have a different point of view. Do share the same goal, obviously. Otherwise, there's going to be conflicts. But that way, you'll have a much deeper experience.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much for all the knowledge sharing and advice, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
I hope you liked my talk with Allard. Please join me next time for other amazing conversations with wonderful guests. Until then, have a great time and happy coding.